Have you ever had someone judge your child's behavior without knowing the full story, making you feel like you're failing as a parent when you're actually fighting battles they can't see? I spent months questioning my daughter's reactions to what seemed like simple requests until a courtroom revelation changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. The call comes at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, interrupting my review of quarterly tax documents for Henderson and Associates. Mrs. Patterson's voice carries that particular tone of administrative disapproval that every parent learns to recognize, the one that suggests your child has crossed some invisible line of acceptable behavior. Mrs. Turner, I need to speak with you about Emma's conduct today. She was quite rude to Mr. Davidson during art class, and frankly, this pattern of defiance toward male authority figures is becoming concerning. I set down my calculator and reach for the spiral notebook where I've been tracking these incidents since January. Emma Turner, age 9, honor roll student, volunteers to help younger kids with reading, has never had behavioral issues until this school year. The pattern Mrs. Patterson mentions has been building like storm clouds, but not in the way she thinks. What exactly happened? I ask, clicking my pen and dating the top of a fresh page. Mr. Davidson asked the children to clean up their art supplies, and Emma refused to put away her materials. When he specifically addressed her, she said she doesn't have to listen to him and walked away. It was quite disrespectful. My chest tightens, but not with the shame Mrs. Patterson expects. Instead, I feel the familiar surge of protective fury that's been building for months. Emma doesn't refuse to clean up after art class. Emma loves art class, takes pride in organizing supplies, and has never been disrespectful to teachers. But Emma also hasn't been the same child since the divorce finalized and the custody arrangements began. I'll speak with her tonight, I say, making notes about the time, the specific teacher, the alleged behavior. Has this happened before with Mr. Davidson specifically? Several times. And with Mr. Rodriguez in PE and substitute teacher Mr. Brooks last week. She seems to have particular difficulty with male authority figures. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke from a fire I'm trying to locate. Male authority figures. In my notebook, I flip back through pages of similar incidents, all carefully documented with dates, times, witnesses. The pattern is there, but it's not the pattern the school thinks they're seeing. I work as a CPA for Henderson and Associates here in Plano, specializing in forensic accounting for divorce cases. I know how to read between the lines of financial documents, how to spot irregularities that tell bigger stories, how to document evidence that others might dismiss as coincidence. For the past 4 months, I've been applying those same skills to my daughter's life, and the picture emerging makes me sick to my stomach. Emma's defiance toward male authority figures started in January, exactly 2 weeks after her father's visitation schedule increased from every other weekend to alternating weeks. Her rude behavior coincides perfectly with the days following her returns from her father's house. The incidents aren't random acts of disrespect. They're a 9-year-old's survival mechanism responding to something the adults around her refuse to see. After school, I pick up Emma from the aftercare program, watching her face carefully as she climbs into my Honda Civic. She's wearing the purple sweater I bought her for the first day of school, but it hangs differently on her now, like she's trying to disappear inside it. Mrs. Patterson called about art class today, I say gently, adjusting the rearview mirror to make eye contact. Do you want to tell me what happened with Mr. Davidson? Emma's hands twist in her lap, and her voice comes out smaller than usual. He told me to clean up, but I was still working on my painting. I said I wasn't finished, and he said it didn't matter. I had to stop right then, so I said I don't have to listen to him. Why did you say that, sweetheart? She looks out the window at the other cars in the school pickup line, and her answer arrives in a whisper. Because Daddy says I don't have to listen to men who try to boss me around when he's not there to protect me. The traffic light blurs as my eyes fill with tears I refuse to let fall. There it is, the missing piece that explains everything. Emma isn't being defiant, she's following instructions. Instructions that are designed to undermine her relationships with every male authority figure in her life, creating chaos that can be weaponized later. That evening, I call my attorney, Patricia Hernandez, from my kitchen table, while Emma works on homework in the living room. The documents from our custody case are spread across the granite countertop like evidence in a trial that never ended. Patricia, I need to document something. Emma's school is reporting behavioral issues, but I think David is coaching her to be defiant toward male teachers. That's parental alienation territory, Jennifer. Hard to prove, but devastating if we can document it properly. Are you keeping records? I flip through my notebook, pages of careful documentation that would make any forensic accountant proud. Every incident, every date, every witness. The pattern is clear once you see it. Good, keep doing that. And Jennifer, trust your instincts. You know your daughter better than anyone. But do I? That's the insidious thing about this kind of manipulation. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about your own child. Emma has always been thoughtful, respectful, eager to please. The girl described in these school reports sounds like a stranger, and I'm beginning to understand that's exactly the point. Later that night, I sit on Emma's bed as she brushes her teeth, and I make a decision that will change everything. I'm done letting other people define my daughter's behavior without understanding the context. I'm done allowing a system designed to protect children to be manipulated into punishing the very child it should be helping. Tomorrow, I'll start building a case that goes beyond my careful notebooks and documented patterns. Because sometimes the only way to prove a child isn't really being rude is to show a judge exactly who's been teaching her to act that way. The truth, I'm learning, requires more than good parenting. It requires good documentation and the courage to fight for it in court. The breaking point comes during a parent-teacher conference on a Thursday afternoon in April. I'm sitting across from Mrs. Patterson and Principal Rodriguez in those uncomfortable plastic chairs that make every adult feel like they're being disciplined. Watching them flip through a folder thick with incident reports that have Emma's name on every page. Mrs. Turner, we need to discuss Emma's escalating behavior, Principal Rodriguez says, his voice carrying the weight of administrative finality. Yesterday, she told Mr. Davidson that she knows her rights and doesn't have to participate in group activities with boys. Today, she refused to line up with male classmates for lunch. This is becoming disruptive to the entire classroom environment. My pen hovers over my notebook as I process this information. Emma knows her rights. Those aren't words a 9-year-old learns from Sesame Street. Those are words carefully planted by someone who understands exactly how they'll be received by school administrators. Has she explained why she's uncomfortable with these situations? I ask, though I suspect I already know the answer. Mrs. Patterson adjusts her reading glasses and consults her notes. She says her father told her that men who aren't family shouldn't be allowed to tell her what to do, and that she should always question male authority. Yesterday, She asked Mr. Davidson if he had proper supervision credentials to be alone with children. The room feels like it's tilting. Proper supervision credentials. David works in corporate security. He knows exactly which phrases will trigger mandatory reporting protocols and administrative investigations. He's not just alienating Emma from male authority figures, he's turning her into a weapon against the school system itself. I think we need to consider whether Emma might benefit from counseling, Principal Rodriguez continues. These behaviors suggest possible trauma or anxiety around male figures, and we want to make sure she gets the support she needs. Here's what they don't understand. Emma isn't traumatized by male authority figures. She's being systematically programmed to distrust them by the one male authority figure who has unlimited access to her psyche. But explaining this feels like trying to describe a color that doesn't exist. The manipulation is so sophisticated that it looks like protection, sounds like empowerment, and masks itself as a father's love. After the conference, I drive straight to Patricia Hernandez's law office in downtown Plano, a converted historic building where the floors creak with the weight of family disputes that never really end. Patricia has been practicing family law for 15 years, and she's seen every variation of parental alienation that exists. Jennifer, what you're describing is textbook coaching, she says, reviewing my documentation with the clinical precision of someone who's built cases from similar fragments. David is teaching Emma to create chaos in environments where you have to advocate for her, making you look like the parent who can't control her behavior. She pulls out a legal pad and starts sketching a timeline that makes my stomach drop. Look at this pattern. Emma's behavioral issues started 2 weeks after David's increased visitation began. The incidents always happen at school, never at home, never in environments where David would be held accountable. And the specific language she's using, rights, proper credentials, supervision, that's not child vocabulary. I lean forward, feeling like a forensic accountant finally seeing the cooked books that explain years of discrepancies. So, what do? We document everything and request a custody evaluation with a child psychologist who specializes in alienation cases. But Jennifer, I need to warn you, this is going to get worse before it gets better. When David realizes we're building a case, he's going to escalate. She's right. The escalation comes that Friday when Emma returns from her father's house with a cell phone, a pink iPhone in a glittery case that she clutches like a security blanket. Daddy got this for me so I can call him if anyone at school tries to make me uncomfortable, she explains, showing me how he's programmed his number as an emergency contact labeled Help Dad. He said if any teachers or men try to be alone with me, I should call him right away. My hands shake as I examine the phone. David has essentially given our 9-year-old daughter a direct line to undermine any authority figure who might try to address her behavior. Every teacher interaction, every administrative conversation, every attempt at normal school discipline can now become a crisis that requires paternal intervention. That weekend, I sit in my home office surrounded by months of documentation, incident reports, email chains with teachers, notes from parent conferences, screenshots of text messages where David subtly questions every male figure in Emma's life. The pattern is so clear that I can't understand how I missed it for so long. But that's the insidious genius of this kind of manipulation. It happens gradually, like a slow leak that floods your basement while you're looking for dramatic bursts that never come. Each incident seems manageable in isolation. A child having a bad day, a teacher being too strict, normal adjustment issues after divorce. It's only when you step back and see the systematic nature of the chaos that the true picture emerges. Monday morning, I make 2 phone calls that will change everything. The first is to Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who specializes in custody disputes and parental alienation. The second is to Emma's school, requesting a formal meeting with all of her male teachers to discuss coordination of support strategies. If you've ever felt like you're fighting an invisible battle where everyone can see the symptoms but no one understands the disease, you know the exhaustion that comes with being the only person who recognizes the pattern. I'm about to prove that sometimes the most damaging parenting doesn't look like abuse. It looks like a father protecting his daughter from dangers that don't exist. The evidence is overwhelming, but evidence only matters if someone with authority is willing to examine it. In 2 weeks, I'll find out if the family court system is ready to see what I've been documenting for months. That my daughter isn't rude, she's being coached to appear uncontrollable in environments where I have to defend her. The difference between those 2 things I'm about to learn is everything. Doctor, Sarah Chen's office feels like a sanctuary designed to make children comfortable. Soft lighting, colorful artwork, a play area with carefully chosen toys that reveal more than parents realize. I'm sitting in the observation room with one-way glass, watching Emma interact with Dr. Chen through what's supposed to be a routine evaluation but feels like the most important hour of our lives. Emma, can you tell me about school, Dr. So? Chen asks, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who specializes in untangling the psychological warfare that adults wage through children. Emma arranges the dollhouse figures with methodical precision. Mother figure in the kitchen, father figure in the living room, child figure standing between them like a bridge. School is hard because the teachers don't understand that Daddy says I have to be careful around men who aren't my family. What does being careful look like? I'm supposed to ask questions if they want to be alone with me, or if they try to make me do things when Daddy's not there to make sure I'm safe. Like, if Mr. Davidson wants me to stay after class to clean up, I should ask him why he needs me to be alone, and I should call Daddy to make sure it's okay. Dr. Chen makes notes on her clipboard, and I can see her connecting the same dots I've been mapping for months. Emma isn't describing normal safety awareness. She's reciting a script designed to make every male-teacher interaction feel inappropriate and threatening. Has anyone at school ever made you feel unsafe? Emma pauses, her small hands moving the dolls around the house with unconscious symbolism. Not really unsafe, but Daddy says that's because I've been good about following his rules. He says if I didn't ask questions and call for help, bad things could happen. The evaluation continues for 45 minutes, and I watch my daughter reveal the systematic programming that's been destroying her school relationships. She's been taught to view normal classroom management as potential threats, routine teacher interactions as situations requiring paternal intervention, and standard school authority as something to be questioned and undermined. After Emma goes to the waiting room to read, Dr. Chen invites me into her office. The walls are lined with certificates and awards that speak to decades of experience with situations exactly like ours. Jennifer, what you've documented is a clear case of parental alienation designed to undermine Emma's relationship with male authority figures and create chaos in educational settings, she says, reviewing her notes. Emma is a bright, articulate child who's been given a sophisticated framework for interpreting normal interactions as potentially dangerous. This isn't trauma response, it's learned behavior. I feel vindicated and heartbroken simultaneously. So she's not really having behavioral problems. She's having behavioral problems that are being deliberately created and maintained by coaching that serves someone else's agenda. Emma is performing the role she's been taught to perform. The question is whether the court system will recognize the difference between a troubled child and a child who's being used as a weapon. The next phase of building our case involves something I never imagined I'd have to do: secretly recording my own daughter's phone calls with her father. Patricia Hernandez explains that in Texas, one-party consent laws allow me to record conversations in my own home, and that the evidence could be crucial for demonstrating the coaching that's happening. The recordings are devastating. I sit in my kitchen with headphones on, listening to David systematically undermine every male figure in Emma's life while positioning himself as her only reliable protector. Remember, sweetheart, if Mr. Rodriguez tries to make you do PE activities you're not comfortable with, you call me immediately. His voice carries through the speakers with the patience of someone who's rehearsed these conversations multiple times. Men who work with children should always be happy to explain their rules and get permission from parents. If they get angry when you ask questions, that means they have something to hide. What if I get in trouble for not participating? Then we'll know the school isn't keeping you safe, and Daddy will have to take steps to protect you. But don't worry, you're being very brave by standing up for yourself. Each conversation follows the same pattern. David presents himself as the protector, the school as potentially dangerous, and Emma's defiant behavior as evidence of strength and self-advocacy. He's turning normal childhood compliance into a betrayal of paternal loyalty, normal teacher authority into potential threat. The most chilling recording comes on a Thursday evening in early May. Emma is describing a math lesson where Mr. Brooks, a substitute teacher, had asked her to solve a problem at the front of the class. I told him I don't feel comfortable being the center of attention with male teachers, and I asked him to call you to make sure it was educationally necessary. Emma reports with the matter-of-fact tone of someone following protocol. That's exactly right, Princess. You're learning to protect yourself and ask the right questions. Now, did he seem frustrated when you asked for clarification about his teaching methods? Yeah, he said I was being disruptive and that I needed to either participate or go to the principal's office. David's voice shifts into a tone I recognize from our marriage, the subtle fury that always preceded his most manipulative campaigns. That sounds like a man who doesn't want to be questioned about his authority over little girls. We need to document this incident and make sure the school understands that Emma has the right to feel safe in her learning environment. I stop the recording and stare at my kitchen wall, processing what I've just heard. David isn't protecting Emma from potential threats. He's creating an environment where normal interactions become threatening through the lens of his coaching. He's turned my daughter into a 9-year-old investigator whose job is to find problems with every man who tries to teach, supervise, or guide her. The documentation I've been gathering for months suddenly crystallizes into a clear legal strategy. This isn't a case about a difficult child who needs behavioral intervention. This is a case about psychological manipulation designed to weaponize a child against educational systems and ultimately against me. Patricia reviews the recordings with the focused intensity of someone building a fortress from evidence. This is exactly what we need, Jennifer. David is creating documented proof of coaching every time he has these conversations. The question now is whether we can get this in front of a judge before the school system decides Emma is too disruptive to educate effectively. That decision comes sooner than we expect. On a Friday afternoon in mid-May, I receive a certified letter from Plano Independent School District recommending that Emma be transferred to an alternative educational placement, better equipped to handle students with specialized behavioral and emotional needs. They want to remove my daughter from mainstream education because she's been so successfully coached to appear unmanageable. The system designed to educate her has decided she's the problem, exactly as David intended. But I have recordings, documentation, and a child psychologist who understands the difference between trauma and manipulation. For the first time in months, I'm not fighting this battle alone. The court date is set for June 15th, 3 weeks to prove that my daughter isn't rude. She's been taught to perform rudeness in service of someone else's agenda. The courtroom in downtown Dallas feels like a theater where the most important performance of my life is about to unfold. Judge Margaret Harrison sits behind her bench with the authority of someone who spent 20 years untangling the psychological warfare that parents wage through their children. David sits across the aisle with his attorney, projecting the confidence of a man who believes his manipulation has been invisible. He's wrong. Patricia stands to address the court, and I feel the weight of months of documentation in the folders before her. Recorded phone calls, school incident reports, Dr. Chen's psychological evaluation, time-stamped evidence of systematic coaching disguised as parental protection. Your Honor, we're here today because Emma Turner has been removed from mainstream education due to behavioral issues that her school district believes require alternative placement. However, our evidence will demonstrate that Emma's behaviors are not the result of emotional disturbance or defiance, but rather sophisticated coaching designed to undermine her relationships with male authority figures. David's attorney objects immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Turner has been nothing but protective of his daughter's safety and well-being. Any conversations he's had with Emma have been appropriate parental guidance in an era where we must teach our children to advocate for themselves. Judge Harrison raises her hand for silence. I'll hear the evidence. Proceed, Ms. Hernandez. Patricia presents our case like a forensic accountant revealing embezzled funds, methodically, chronologically, with devastating precision. The timeline shows Emma's behavioral issues beginning exactly 2 weeks after David's increased visitation. The recorded conversations reveal language too sophisticated for a 9-year-old. Dr. Chen's evaluation demonstrates a child performing learned responses rather than expressing genuine trauma. Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording from May 8th that illustrates the systematic nature of this coaching. David's voice fills the courtroom through the speakers. Remember, sweetheart, if any man at school tries to make you uncomfortable by asking you to participate in activities without proper supervision, you have the right to question his authority and call for help. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for protecting yourself. Emma's response: what if the principal says I'm being disruptive? Then we'll know the school prioritizes adult convenience over child safety, and Daddy will have to take legal action to ensure you're properly protected. The courtroom is silent except for the quiet scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her keyboard. Judge Harrison's expression shifts from polite attention to focused scrutiny as she reviews the transcript Patricia provides. Ms. Hernandez, what is the petitioner's position regarding Mr. Turner's parenting approach? Your Honor, Mr. Turner has systematically taught Emma to interpret normal educational authority as potentially threatening, to view routine teacher interactions as requiring parental intervention, and to perform defiance as a form of self-protection. This coaching has resulted in Emma's removal from mainstream education and has placed her academic future at risk. David's attorney stands for cross-examination, and his strategy becomes immediately clear. Paint me as an overreacting mother who can't accept that her daughter has legitimate behavioral issues. Mrs. Turner, isn't it possible that Emma's behaviors stem from the stress of the divorce and custody arrangements rather than any alleged coaching by her father? I've rehearsed this moment for weeks. Emma shows no behavioral issues in any environment except school, and specifically only with male authority figures. At home, in social settings, with female teachers, and in community activities, she's consistently respectful and cooperative. The behaviors only manifest in situations where she's been specifically coached to view male authority as potentially inappropriate. But you've been recording private conversations between a father and his daughter. Doesn't that suggest you're more interested in building a legal case than addressing Emma's actual needs? Patricia objects, but Judge Harrison allows me to respond. I started recording those conversations because I needed to understand why my daughter was being removed from school for behaviors that made no sense given her personality and history. The recordings revealed systematic coaching that explained everything I'd been documenting for months. The turning point comes when Judge Harrison asks to speak with Emma privately in her chambers. David's confidence finally wavers as he realizes he can't control this conversation or coach Emma's responses in real time. 20 minutes later, Judge Harrison returns to the bench with an expression that makes David shift uncomfortably in his chair. After speaking with Emma, reviewing the evidence presented, and consulting the psychological evaluation, I find clear evidence of parental alienation designed to undermine the child's relationship with educational authority and create disruption in academic settings. She opens the custody file and pulls out the original order, the document that started this entire battle. The current custody arrangement grants Mr. Turner alternating week visitation with liberal phone contact. However, this arrangement was predicated on both parents supporting Emma's educational and social development. Judge Harrison looks directly at David. Mr. Turner, your coaching of Emma to distrust and defy male authority figures constitutes a form of psychological manipulation that is harmful to her educational progress and social development. Your approach to protecting your daughter has actually endangered her academic future. The new custody order is swift and decisive. David's visitation is reduced to supervised visits twice per month until he completes a co-parenting class focused on supporting children's relationships with appropriate authority figures. Phone contact is limited to specific times and cannot include discussions about school personnel or educational policies. Most importantly, Judge Harrison orders Emma to receive counseling to help her distinguish between appropriate safety awareness and the hypervigilance that's been systematically programmed into her responses. As we leave the courthouse, David makes one final attempt at manipulation. Jennifer, you've turned our daughter against me and destroyed our relationship. I hope you're satisfied. But I'm not turning Emma against her father. I'm protecting her from being turned against herself. The difference, I finally understand, is everything. Patricia squeezes my shoulder as we walk to our cars in the June heat. Jennifer, you just prevented Emma from being permanently labeled as emotionally disturbed because one parent decided to weaponize her love and trust. That's not just good parenting. That's heroic parenting. That evening, I explained the court's decision to Emma in language she can understand. Her relief is immediate and overwhelming, the relief of a child who no longer has to perform conflict in order to prove loyalty. "Does this mean I can just be a normal kid at school?" she asks, curling up beside me on the couch. "Yes, sweetheart. You can just be yourself." For the first time in months, that seems like enough. 3 months later, I'm sitting in another parent-teacher conference, but this time the atmosphere feels completely different. Mrs. Patterson and Principal Rodriguez have the same faces, the same conference room, the same plastic chairs, but Emma's file tells a completely different story. Mrs. Turner: "Emma has made remarkable progress since the beginning of the school year," Mrs. Patterson says, flipping through papers that document transformation rather than problems. "Her interactions with Mr. Davidson are respectful and engaged. She participates enthusiastically in group activities and has become one of our most helpful students during transitions." Principal Rodriguez nods, consulting his notes with the satisfaction of an educator watching a child find her way back to success. "Whatever interventions you've implemented have been extraordinarily effective. Emma went from being recommended for alternative placement to being nominated for our student leadership program." I smile, knowing they don't need to understand the legal and psychological battle that created this change. What matters is that Emma is free to be herself, cooperative, thoughtful, eager to learn, without the burden of performing conflict to demonstrate loyalty. The real transformation isn't just in Emma's school behavior, though that's the most visible change. It's in her relationship with authority, with rules, with the basic social contracts that make classroom learning possible. She no longer views male teachers as potential threats requiring investigation and parental intervention. She no longer interprets routine classroom management as evidence of inappropriate authority. Most importantly, she no longer carries the exhausting burden of being a 9-year-old detective whose job is to find problems that don't exist. Dr. Chen's follow-up sessions have been crucial in helping Emma process the confusion of having her reality systematically distorted for months. Children are remarkably resilient, but they're also remarkably vulnerable to adults who manipulate their trust and love for psychological warfare. Emma understands now that the protection she was receiving was actually making her life harder, Dr. Chen explains during one of our sessions. Children want to trust authority figures, want to feel safe in educational environments, want to participate in normal social activities. When we teach them to view these desires as dangerous, we're not protecting them, we're isolating them. Emma's relationship with her father has stabilized within the new boundaries established by the court. The supervised visits have allowed them to rebuild connection without the coaching sessions that were destroying her ability to function in normal social environments. David has completed his co-parenting classes, though I suspect he views them as a bureaucratic hurdle rather than genuine education about healthy child development. The most profound change is in Emma's confidence. She no longer second-guesses every interaction with male authority figures, no longer feels responsible for investigating potential threats that were never real. She can focus her considerable intelligence on learning rather than performing hypervigilance. Last week, she came home excited about a science project Mr. Davidson had assigned. "Mom, he's teaching us about weather patterns, and he said I could be the team leader for our tornado experiment." The enthusiasm in her voice reminded me of the child she was before the coaching began. Curious, confident, naturally inclined toward leadership. When I asked if she felt comfortable being alone with Mr. Davidson to discuss project details, she looked at me with the puzzled expression of a child who doesn't understand why that would be a concern. "He's my teacher, Mom. Of course it's okay." That response represents months of therapeutic work to undo systematic programming designed to make normal interactions feel threatening. It represents a child reclaiming her right to trust appropriate authority figures and participate fully in her education. The legal victory was important, but the personal victory is everything. Emma's file no longer contains reports of defiance and disruption. Instead, it documents a bright, engaged student who contributes positively to classroom environments and maintains respectful relationships with all her teachers. My documentation skills as a forensic accountant proved crucial in building the case that saved Emma's educational future, but the real skill I needed was the courage to trust my instincts when everyone else was focused on symptoms rather than causes. Sometimes the most important thing a parent can do is refuse to accept surface explanations when deeper patterns suggest systematic manipulation. If you're questioning whether your child's behavioral issues might be the result of coaching or alienation rather than genuine problems, trust that instinct. Document everything. Seek professional evaluation from experts who understand the difference between trauma and manipulation. And remember that children who seem difficult or defiant might actually be performing roles they've been taught to play. The most damaging parenting often looks like protection from the outside. The most heroic parenting sometimes looks like overreaction to people who can't see the full picture. But children's futures hang in the balance of these distinctions, and they deserve adults who will fight for their right to develop authentic relationships with appropriate authority figures. What would change in your child's life if you stopped accepting surface explanations and started investigating the patterns beneath their behaviors? Sometimes the answer reveals that your child isn't broken. They're being systematically taught to appear broken in service of someone else's agenda. The difference between a rude child and a coached child is documentation, professional evaluation, and a legal system willing to look beyond symptoms to causes. Emma's story proves that when adults take the time to understand rather than simply react, children can reclaim their authentic selves and their right to succeed in environments designed to support their growth. The judge's decision to examine that custody order didn't just change Emma's educational trajectory, it gave her back her childhood. Sometimes the most powerful protection a parent can offer isn't shielding their child from imaginary threats, but shielding them from the adults who profit from manufacturing those threats. Emma is 10 now, thriving in 5th grade, and recently asked if she could run for student council. When I asked what her platform would be, she grinned with the confidence of a child who knows her voice matters. Helping kids feel safe to ask questions and make mistakes while they're learning. She's learned the difference between real protection and performed vulnerability. That's a lesson that will serve her far beyond elementary school, far beyond the reach of anyone who might try to weaponize her trust again.